In the last month, it was as though a huge, thick, immovable curtain was torn in two, came crashing down, revealing the filth that was behind it for decades, possibly centuries. A curtain came crashing down just this past month, and I am talking about the sexual exploitation of women and men in the entertainment industry. On Thursday, October 5th, a month ago, the New York Times published an article detailing decades of allegations of sexual harassment against Harvey Weinstein. Actresses Rosie McGowan and Ashley Judd were among the women who came forward. By the next Sunday, October 8th, Harvey Weinstein was sacked by the board of his own company. Tuesday, October 10th, allegations from 13 more women against Weinstein was published in the New Yorker magazine. And since the publication, the total number of accusers today goes beyond 80 women. The public condemnation of Harvey Weinstein has seemingly emboldened others to come forward with allegations of sexual misconduct against other celebrities in what some would have dubbed, quote, the Weinstein ripple effect. In the past month alone, there were allegations against people such as Mark Halperin, the senior political analyst of NBC News. Multiple men came forward accusing Kevin Spacey, who since has lost many contracts, including House of Cards. There was a movie, All the Money in the World, directed by Ridley Scott, that was supposed to come out in December, starring Kevin Spacey. The director, Ridley Scott, decided to reshoot the whole movie without Kevin Spacey in it, using Christopher Plummer instead. More than 7 actresses came forward to accuse director Brett Ratner, the director of X-Men: The Last Stand, of sexual misconduct, and he has since stepped away from all Warner Brothers-related activities. 2 women accused Dustin Hoffman of sexual harassment over the years, and he has since apologized for his behavior. 5 women have accused comedian Louis C.K. of sexual misconduct over the past 15 years. He admitted to them and apologized. He has since lost all his contracts with HBO, FX, and Netflix. And there was a movie supposed to come out next week starring him. The production studio announced that they will no longer be releasing this movie after the allegations. And the list goes on and on and on. These are more of the prominent ones, but the list is endless. In the past month, multiple men have been accused of sexual misconduct and is experiencing harsh criticism because of it. Now, I want to know 2 things. One, it's not that these events all happened in the past month, right? It's simply that in the past month, there was a big revealing of what has been there for decades and decades. It's pretty much a dramatic uncovering of the ugly culture of the entertainment industry that was already there for many decades. And number 2, this ugly culture where sexual harassment is so common exists because the entertainment industry is rooted in the sexual objectification of people in the industry, especially women. I'll say that again. This ugly culture where sexual harassment is almost the norm is there because the entertainment industry itself is rooted in the objectification of people, seeing people as objects, as commodities to consume, especially women. In other words, at the root of this Weinstein ripple effect, if you will, is people being objectified, people being seen as objects and not fully human. And we, as the church, cannot just brush this off and go, oh, well, that's Hollywood. That's what happens over there. They have nothing to do with me. We can't say that because it has everything to do with us. It has everything to do with us. This hyper-sexualized culture in the entertainment industry, whether we see it in magazines or TVs or movies, directly correlates to the normalization of sexual objectification in our own communities. Trending buzz topics among teenage girls these days includes one, the thigh gap effect. Have any of you heard this? The thigh gap effect? So apparently it's attractive to have a gap between your thighs. So teenage girls would saran wrap their thighs overnight, hoping that when they wake up, there will be a gap between their thighs. There's the Kylie Jenner effect. The Kylie Jenner challenge, where one is encouraged to use a Gatorade bottle and create a vacuum over your lips for an hour. And when you take out the Gatorade bottle, then your lips look puffy because apparently thick lips is supposed to be attractive. Both trends have led to serious physical harm and hospitalizations of young teenage girls. As models became thinner and thinner over the years, eating disorders like anorexia, bulimia, these terms became household, commonly known words. You see, it's not just Hollywood. It's not just over there. This is our wives, our cousins, our sisters, our brothers, our children, our children's children that are being affected by this every day. The objectification of people is affecting our immediate community. So, what can we do? Right? Pastor James, that's really bleak and really discouraging, very negative. Okay, what can we do? What can we do? And sure, this sermon, I was thinking about it this past week, it could take the direction of, okay, therefore stop objectifying women, or stop watching TV, or stop watching movies, or stop saying sexually rude things, stop this, stop that. And, these are all good, important things, but today, more than the don'ts, more than the don't do this, don't do that, I want to focus on the do. What can we do? And to answer this question of what can we do, we need to know the why and the how. And before we dive deeper, I just want to clarify that as we go into the why in no way justifies behavior, but it will help us understand it better. It does not justify behavior, but it will help us understand it better. So the passage we read this morning, 1 Samuel 16, shows us the why and the how. First, the why. Now, this story, it takes place around 1040 BCE. The people of Israel have complained to God, saying, God, we want a king, give us a king. We want to be like all the other countries, give us a king. So they get a tall, handsome guy named Saul. King Saul is their king, but King Saul disobeys God, disappoints the prophet Samuel. God tells Samuel that God has chosen another man to be the next king. Samuel follows the command of God. He ends up in the house of Jesse. Jesse has many sons, and Jesse lines up his 7 sons, and Samuel goes to each of them. And Samuel thinks, wow, these are good-looking guys. They're really tall and handsome. I'm sure one of them is the next king. But each time God says, nope, next. Samuel goes through all 7 sons, and each time God says no, right? Samuel asks a strange question to Jesse. Hey, Jesse, do you have any other sons? And Jesse responds in verse 11, there remains yet the youngest, but he is keeping the sheep. Now, this translation does a grave injustice. The word translated into the English word youngest is the Hebrew word hakatan, which means worthless, which means unimportant, worthless. Jesse is saying, oh, I have a worthless one who is out in the field tending the sheep. This passage, if you read the Hebrew and understand the Hebrew, it gives us a glimpse into what David's childhood must have been like. The words spoken in his household. Even the David and Goliath moments was an accident, right? So David's brothers were all 7 of them were out at war, the honorable thing to do for a man at the time, while David was forced to stay home because he was the worthless one. The David and Goliath moment only happened because David was sent to deliver lunch to his brothers out in the battlefield. And while he was there, he overheard Goliath's taunts. Goliath, a 9-foot giant of the enemy army, was taunting the Israelite army to send out one of their best soldiers for a one-on-one battle that the losing team would then become the slaves to the winning team. Some biblical historians suggest that King Saul, he allowed little David to represent the Israelites because he was so small. He was just a small boy, right? So no one would really take him seriously, right? It was like as if there was a huge fight between two guys and then a little kid comes along, right? So King Saul thought, if Goliath kills David, he wouldn't take him seriously. He knows that he's not the best soldier. This would not lose us the actual battle. You see, David was seen as expendable. David was worthless. Imagine what kind of childhood, what this kind of childhood does to a boy who becomes a man. In a study published in 2001 in the British Journal of Psychiatry, titled Cycle of Child Abuse Linked Between Being a Victim and Becoming a Perpetrator, Glasser, Cloven, Campbell, and Farrelly concluded that men who were abused as a child were 5 times more likely to act out in erratic sexual behavior and 3 times more likely to be a perpetrator of abuse when becoming an adult. Many Christian psychologists have done case studies with David in the Bible and concluded that he too was probably the victim of verbal and emotional abuse, which could explain the unhealthy sexual behavior he exhibits later in life. Specifically, David eventually becomes king, and there's peace in the kingdom. He's lounging in his castle when he sees a woman bathing, and he is filled with lust, and he calls her over and he lies with her. Turns out she's pregnant, and she's the wife of one of David's top military officials. David, through twists and turns, gets the man killed in battle so that he can keep Bathsheba for himself. If you ever get a chance to read 1 and 2 Samuel and then 1 Kings, you'll see David's early life was filled with heroics, God moments, miracles, amazing provision from God, amazing, incredible stories. But from this moment on, after this terrible sin that David commits, David experiences hell on earth until the moment he dies. His sons revolt against him. He is humiliated. He has to run away from his own home many times. There is political unrest during transition of power to his son Solomon. From the moment David decides to use his power to fulfill his lustful desires and use Bathsheba as an object of his sexual gratification until his death, David is miserable. And I wonder how similar this is to Harvey Weinstein's experience. Since the allegations started coming forth, Weinstein expressed that he had an abusive childhood, that he was, quote, messed up in the head, that perhaps violence against women, that seeing women as objects he can use to gratify his harmful desires and power trip to somehow is somehow connected to childhood trauma, that perhaps someone once called him a worthless one, that perhaps he too is now experiencing hell on earth. Again, I want to clarify that this in no way justifies his behavior, but it helps us to try understand why. Because when we know why, we just might be able to prevent it in the future. And finally, the how. As Jesse has his 7 sons lined up, Samuel was impressed with what he saw, right? Tall, handsome men, strong-looking men. We too are often swayed by what we see in the physical appearances in people. Or take it further, we let what we think other people see in us sway how we think of ourselves. As we are saturated by an objectification culture, we often find ourselves objectifying others and even objectifying ourselves. Our gaze and the gaze of people carries so much weight in the decisions we make in our lives. Isn't that true? What we wear, how we talk, what we eat, where we live, what car we drive, what makeup we put on. We give so much power and authority to the gaze of people. And yet it is like paper currency that's not backed up by gold, right? There's no actual real value behind it. Now, there is, however, a gaze. There is a gaze that matters. The gaze that is perfect, the gaze of absolute truth, the gaze that determines our salvation, the gaze of God. And in verse 7, God reveals the rubric of his gaze, the angle from which he looks at us. Verse 7 said, "The Lord said to Samuel, 'Do not look on his appearance or on the height of his stature, because I have rejected him, for the Lord does not see as mortals see.'" They look on the outward appearance, right? They objectify, but the Lord looks on the heart. The one true gaze that actually matters does not look at the outer appearance, does not look at us as an object, does not look at us like a piece of meat. The one true gaze does not look on the outer appearance, but looks on the heart. Now, at first, this sounds sweet and nice. This sounds pretty lovely, but if you really, really think about it, if we become honest with ourselves, this is absolutely terrifying. I can easily meet the objectifying standards of the human gaze without revealing the brokenness that is actually inside of me, right? I can dress well, I can speak in eloquent ways, I could act like a gentleman, and you'll think, wow, James is a great guy. James is wonderful. All the while, inside, I might be suffering from self-doubt, with guilt, with addiction, with sin. But if the one true gaze is not looking on the outward appearance and what I do on the outside and how I look on the outside, but is looking on the heart, I'm screwed. We're all screwed. If good-looking and tall Eliab was rejected by God, what chance do we have? What chance do we have? Brothers and sisters, we have a chance. Romans 3:23-24 says this, "All have sinned and fallen short of the glory of God." All of us fall short at the perfect judging gaze of the perfect one true God, but are justified by his grace as a gift through the redemption that is in Christ Jesus. Colossians 2:13 says this, "You who were dead in your trespasses and the uncircumcision of your flesh, God made alive together with Jesus, having forgiven us all our trespasses by canceling the record of debt that stood against us with its legal demands. This he set aside, nailing it to the cross." Right? God so loved the world. God loved you and me and wanted a real relationship with us, not just a relationship with your body, but a relationship with you in your entirety, that he gave his only son to die on the cross, that whoever believes in him will be liberated from the gaze of people, the objectifying gaze of people, and also be perfect under the gaze of God, thereby experiencing the eternity found in the kingdom of God. This is the how. The why and the how. So, now that we know the why and the how, brothers and sisters, what can we do? 1, knowing that the objectification culture is deeply rooted in trauma and abuse from an early age. Be careful what you say to others, especially children. Are you calling them names? Are you saying things to children you shouldn't say? Are you calling them worthless? Your words carry the same creative and destructive, potentially, power as the words that God used to create the heavens and the earth. brothers and sisters, be careful what you say. Number 2, knowing that the objectification culture leads to invalidated value placed on the empty gaze of people. Brothers and sisters, look upon the cross. Give your life to the one true gaze. Give your life to Christ and be liberated from the objectifying gaze and instead hold on to the one true gaze of a loving God. Because where other people may look at you and say, you're worthless, you're too thin, you're too fat, you're too young, you're too old, God looks at you and says, it is good. God looks at you and says, you are beautiful. The Lord does not see as mortals see. They look not on the outward appearance, but the Lord looks on the heart. I pray we too would be a church that would be countercultural to the objectification culture. A church that doesn't gaze like the world does, but a church that shares in the gaze of God. Looking at the whole human being, especially looking at the heart, and saying, it is beautiful. Can you just close your eyes and look to yourself and say, you are beautiful? Just silently to yourself. Just close your eyes and let God speak to you those words of truth. You are beautiful. You are beautiful. Amen.